I met and married an Oneida elder, Jackie Michael King, or Jigonsaseh, of Oklahoma. We were married for 25 years. We established Indian Territory Culture Center and Painted Horse Native Museum. Jack had been trained as a ceremonial person, and he had told me that the families who went to Oklahoma did so because they wanted to live the old way. They were rejecting the code of Handsome Lake and the Christianity of the missionaries. He even painted it on his dance shield. Half were on the lost side in darkness, and half had kept the old ways and were in the light. I was adopted into the Amanda Bearskin Greenback family, Seneca Deer Clan, Hubert Sky of Six Nations officiating. In 2003, Chief Bearskin and Tribal Council made me Master Associate Artist for the nation. Shortly after we had opened as Indian Territory Culture Center, we were visited by Jake and Yvonne Thomas of Six Nations. When they left, they gifted us some recordings of the Great Law and some books of the oral histories of the Haudenosaunee that Jake had compiled. These things set me on a path that would make my life anything but ordinary. My association with the Ungwe exposed me to the world view and to the ancient stories of creation and the peacemaker era, stories that I fell in love with, became obsessed with, and painted 36 paintings of, and finally, out of necessity, decided to tell the stories I had found. So let's do a quick review of these stories. There is a sky world, where the Sky Council laid out a plan to bring people to the earth. It would involve sending a pregnant woman through a hole in the sky world down to the water earth below. There are many different versions of the story as to how this happened. However, within 3 days, Sky Woman gave birth to a beautiful little girl, whom she named Long-Tail Fat-Face Lynx. Face Lynx grew very quickly, and North Wind, who has a strong connection to the spirit world and the color blue, falls in love with Long-Tail Fat-Face Lynx, and they have a set of twins, which comes to us as the good twin and the bad twin. Then these reincarnate during the Peacemaker's time to finish playing out the dysfunction that is left in the creation story. Bad Twin was tossed out after he kills his mother Lynx in birth, and having never known love, becomes the wretched Tadadaho in the middle of time. His mother is reborn to take him into the fold and complete the cycle of love that he has been missing. All in all, it is a very intertwining story of healing psyches and unconditional love as his cosmic brother and mother seek to reclaim him. In the story I had fallen in love with, there were two culture heroes, the peacemaker born of a virgin and sent by Creator to bring peace to the earth, and Hiawatha, an Onondaga seeking peace who joined the Mohawks but experienced such great sadness in his life that he had lost his memory of who he was until the peacemaker restored his memory. There was a third one in which Jack told me how powerful she was and that she was the reason the clan women ran the show, but I was having a difficult time finding any information on her. The books I had talked about the great peace woman who was the first to accept the great law when the peacemaker brought it to her, and that was it. They didn't even mention her name. With what Jack had told me, there had to be more. It was curious that here is this woman that the peacemaker would call Mother of Nations, and yet not much was said about her. What stories I read said nothing as to why the peacemaker would seek out this woman in particular, and some stories called her a murderous witch or a prostitute. I myself even had questions, wondering about a woman living alone with wild warriors in a forest Was she bigger and hairier than any of them? My curiosity about this woman was consuming, and I had to know more. But I will admit that my access to old manuscripts was very limited, and I felt that the older, the closer to the truth the story would be. I had read so much for my own curiosity, and I had not recorded any of them, so I had no idea where I got parts of my story. They were there in my head when I decided to write them down. On a trip to 6 Nations, I was given a book that was translated by the Mohawk Language Group from Hewitt's transcriptions. These were creation stories, but a key piece of information was missing, which would change even these carefully translated stories. I had come across Eli Parker's book, The Life of General Eli Parker, last Grand Sachem of the Iroquois, Buffalo Historical Society. In my reading, I had found a distrust of Eli among his own people. I did not find that unusual, as Eli rose in the ranks of the colonial world. He was a Seneca attorney, engineer, and tribal diplomat. He wrote the final draft of the Confederate surrender terms of Appomattox. Later in his career, Parker rose to the rank of Brigadier General, one of only 2 Native Americans to do that during the Civil War, and President Grant appointed him as Commissioner of Indian Affairs, the very first Native American to hold that post. These accomplishments with the colonial world were distrusted. It was an old around-the-fort Indian dilemma. And to top it off, he also became a Christian. Lots of reasons to distrust him, and yet he served as chief of the 6 Iroquois nations, consisting of the Tuscarora, Cayugas, Senecas, Mohawks, Oneidas, and Onondagas. And Parker began his career in public service by working as an interpreter and diplomat to the Seneca chiefs in their negotiations about land and treaty rights. In 1852, Parker was made Sachem of the Seneca and given the name Keeper of the Western Door of the Longhouse of the Iroquois. And then his sister Caroline Parker was the last Jigonsaseh of the Haudenosaunee. It seemed to me that there was a lot more to trust than not to trust, and his references were much older than the others that I had found. Eli Parker had this to say about the Jigonsaseh of the Peacemaker epic. In the wampum codes of the 6 Nations of the Iroquois, we are told that both Hiawatha, the Onondaga, and Deconawida, the Wyandot, made their journeys to the tribes with the Great Mother, Jigonsaseh, the Kakwa, and consulted her in every important detail. Without the approval of this Mother of Nations and her sanction of Hiawatha's plans, the integrity of the principles of the Confederacy of the 5 Nations could have been assailed. But Jigonsaseh, who was regarded as a descendant of the first woman who had come to earth, and as direct descendant of the first Yegowane, the woman who was the mother of all the first Ongwe, she was sacred to her people, for her word was law, and her sanction was necessary in all political matters of intertribal importance. Eli Parker also stated that she was like a judge, being a counselor and advisor to as many as 14 nations, and he listed them. He said that men could come to her doorway, bitter enemies ready to kill each other, and when they left, they were filled with brotherly love for one another. Such was her skill and wisdom, like Solomon of old. I was struck with the word sacred and immediately wondered how she became a witch and prostitute in recent times. Obviously, in the 1830s, she was still an honored woman, a Yegowane. Of course, my societal indoctrination elicited visuals of prostitutes with red lights and fishnet stockings, neither of which they had in those times, and so I wondered what could possibly denote that profession when Haudenosaunee women were known for being self-possessing. It quite frankly sounded like patriarchal Christianity at work here. Eli Parker also stated that she was a Kakwa. Other texts mentioned Erie, Huron, Wendat Neutral, the Cat People, and others which would be reasonable, as all nations that honored her would want to claim her. He said that her lineage fell among the Antiwandarak, a Huron-neutral nation. Perhaps I would find the answer there, since most texts I had read to date were either Mohawk or Onondaga versions, interpreted and written by colonial men. And through Wendake, I was connected with the Seneca and Wyandot Bear Clan mother, Barbara Mann. I learned some key aspects. I learned that early anthropologists and ethnographers only spoke to the men and did not talk to Native women, thinking they had nothing to offer, which was the prevailing mindset of the colonial men of the time about women in general. However, the peacemaker had established a true democracy, and in keeping with the balance and harmony of creation and Iroquoian teachings, men and women were participants in all ways, including the keepings or oral histories of the people. The men kept their keepings, and the women kept the women's keepings. Therefore, since the women had not been asked, half of the keepings, half of the stories, half of the information, half of the histories were missing from recorded history. With the missing parts, the predominant colonial patriarchal society, along with their missionaries, were able to do to the Haudenosaunee women what they had done to their own women, including their most sacred women. The European ancient records of the Hebrew recognize the Shekinah, the name for the Holy Spirit, as Mother God. But modern time has dimmed this knowledge, replacing the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost as the male Trinity. I remember it being explained to me that Mother God was so sacred that Father God didn't want her exposed to humanity, when in fact man had just removed her and turned her into a male. The kind of thing that raises hackles among enlightened individuals. Mother Mary they'd made so holy that she was unearthlike, and no woman could possibly ever attain that state of holiness. She was out of reach of ordinary women. Imagine being pregnant and suddenly your baby are outside of you. Mary Magdalene's part in history has been removed, and she turned into a prostitute, when in truth she was the sister of Lazarus, and they were the wealthy benefactors supporting the ways of the disciples and Yeshua. She was the rabbi's wife, and a sacred woman with whom Yeshua entrusted his most enlightened knowledge as revealed by new manuscripts of the Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of the Beloved. And Mother Earth they turned into a rock, flying through the cosmos, to be poked, drilled, excavated, and polluted. This foreign culture had turned sacred women into prostitute or neutralized them in order to subjugate and defame half the human race. And so the question had to be asked, had colonialization also victimized the Mother of Nations, and had it in time also turned the Mother of Nations into a witch and prostitute to devalue all Haudenosaunee women and break the power of the clan mothers? This knowledge that Handsome Lake, with his new religion, which was akin to a native version of Christianity, had actually had a clan mother stoned for being a witch, added credence to this thought. No wonder Jack's people chose to go south, where they would be away from this influence. So if there is in all things Haudenosaunee teachings, balance and harmony, then there can be no balance and harmony until the women's keepings are added to the men's stories to create a whole history and complete the circle. But how is that to happen? Are there those that still have stories? And because they are not written down, would those stories even be accepted? Sometimes It must just be admitted that things got lost, and there really is not anything that can be done about it. And perhaps on this issue, that is where we are. Another question came up. Eli Parker said that Jigonsaseh was a direct descendant of Sky Woman, and yet the only children in any story were twin boys, which had, down through colonialism, become the good twin and the evil twin, both sounding akin to the Christian dogma of Yeshua and Satan. I knew from my husband's discussions with me that he did not believe in hell, that native peoples had no version of hell until the boat people missionaries brought that belief with them. So basically, the good twin, bad twin was controlled opposition and bogus. But what drew my attention here was direct descendant, which meant to the Haudenosaunee, mother to daughter, and so forth. With only the twin boys as children, it stopped that lineage. And so I had to ask, how was this matriarchal lineage claimed by the Jigonsaseh established? Again, the most knowledgeable clan mother answered. There were two sets of twins, one set boys, one set girls. Well known are the boys, Sapling and Flint, but nearly forgotten were the girls, Sweet Blossom and Blue Jigonsaseh, namesake of her mother Fat-Faced Longtail Jigonsaseh, daughter of Sky Woman, who died in childbirth. Blue Lynx became the link to the original Fat-Faced Longtail Lynx, connecting a long line of honored women to the links of the new countenance of the Peacemaker epic. In an old book of Seneca Tales, Scunny Wundy by Arthur C. Parker, I had found the word Jigonsaseh for the animal lynx in the story, so now I knew the literal translation of Jigonsaseh. It literally meant lynx. That explained why her people were called the cat people, or Eries, which also translates to cats. So we have Sky Woman, who gave birth to the very first Jigonsaseh, long-tailed, fat-faced lynx, who then gave birth to Blue Lynx of the creation epic, and then continued through generations to the lynx of the new face or countenance of the Peacemaker epic, a continual line of inheritance from the beginning of time. To be able to trace that back was simply amazing to me. But our new-faced lynx had been given a new name by the Peacemaker, that of Mother of Nations. When he first met her, he had recognized her as his cosmic mother and the mother of all Ungwehowe, the real people, the first of both sky and earth. And now, as she worked with the people to bring peace and remind them of the original instructions, she would mother them into the Confederacy. In the creation story, her time on earth was cut short, dying at birth of her children. But now here she was back again to complete the task of being mother to all her children, who had now grown to a considerable number. Eli Parker said as many as 14 nations honored her. They knew about her. They knew she was coming. That would have been a birth that all would have known about and looked forward to. I would think that such a woman would be honored indeed. In a visit to Buffalo, I met Franklin Lavoie, a devotee of Jigonsaseh, having had a very lengthy, ethereal experience with her, even to calling her the White Lynx. He shared some very interesting information with me. First was that the city of Buffalo was built on a crossroads of buffalo trails. Anciently, the buffalo had migrated back and forth until great depressions were imprinted in the landscape. All are now covered over with highway systems of our modern society. There was, in fact, a crossroads here, however. Eli Parker said that the Great Peace Woman's Village was on the crossroads, north and south, east and west, which the warriors used on their way to war. Parker called this village Tonawanda, and it was but 6 miles from Niagara Falls. Local lore had it that this area was where Sky Woman landed and the first Jigonsaseh was born. Franklin filled my mind with other local stories and images of a city built by the masons to the goddess, and that Buffalo was to become a city of light, transfigured in the Golden Age. Something extremely spiritual and transcendent had happened here and had the potential for incredible spiritual evolvement in the now. The local legend of Sky Woman birthing the first lynx, fat-faced long-tailed Jigonsaseh, had an interesting twist, and Franklin enlightened me upon it. Imprinted in the stars directly above this magical birthplace was the lynx constellation. It is directly above the vicinity during fall and winter, with the apex being December 21st, the winter solstice. Then he added that just below the lynx constellation was the constellation of Gemini, the twins, rather synchronistically interesting. The geographic crossroads at Buffalo mirrors the mythical quartering of the world. When Jigonsaseh bears 4 children, they stand for the 4 directions and all that is encompassed in those creations, and she's the world axis upon which everything revolves around, in the neck of the turtle representing the voice of peace, reason, justice, and love, the foundation of the peacemaker's 4 white roots of the great law. The children's father is the north wind, and north signifies the upper world, the spiritual world. Jigonsaseh is the axis unites the mundane and the eternal worlds of matter and spirit, a legacy passed to generations of Jigonsaseh and reiterated by the links of the new countenance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Franklin showed me all the energy associated with Jigonsaseh, from heaven to earth, as above, so below, and did so even to the creation of Lake Lynx, or Lake Erie. To quote Franklin, Lake Erie is a reference to the Jigonsaseh. Erie is one name of the many names for Jigonsaseh, the wildcat, and a reflection of the lynx constellation above. As above, so below. A term I had gotten used to as my Jackie viewed the arrangement of heaven in the spirit world to be the same as here on earth. Jigonsaseh is the living representative of Mother Nature, as our present society would envision her, but her spirit, according to the Haudenosaunee oral history, is said to actually inhabit the earth, giving to this celestial sphere life, communication, and all the love that a mother has for her children. Our links of the new countenance could trace her lineage back to Sky Woman, who is now commonly referred to as Grandmother Moon, and for whom this world was created. This idea was widespread and endowed this line of matriarchs with the highest authority on Turtle Island. Franklin had another gift for me. Mary E. Rose Holden, Beaver Clan of the Onondagas at Six Nations, states, the Eries, the Cat people, and Huron neutrals seem to possess unique claim to remembrance that cannot be urged by any other American tribe, a claim still older than the days of Hiawatha, that of kindling the council fires of peace for all the tribes of the continent. To the Eries, the head of the neutral confederacy, which geographically lay intermediate among the nations, was given the divine right of calling a peace council in time of war, thus becoming the arbitrators of all differences between the many nations and confederacies of North America. A woman held the title of Mother of Nations, was to be recognized by all the nations as the head of the neutral confederacy and the custodian of the national peace pipe. There is no doubt that the institution of the pipe of the Peace Council and the power to light the specific fire was represented as having been held by a woman. For a woman to have this kind of power is not unusual, for another legend among the Lakota was established during the time of Old Chief Yellowhorn. A mysterious woman brought to the gathered nations a sacred peace pipe and 7 sacred rites. One reference by Rainbow Thunderheart Shoshone suggests that the pipe came to the Lakota nations as a token gesture because they would not join with the Confederacy under the Great Law. The Cheyenne lay claim to this sacred lady as the White Buffalo Calf Woman, second wife of Sweet Medicine, who lived with them for 445 years. A story that I found, dated 1935, tells of the world flood in a time of great freshet, which took place many centuries ago and destroyed all the nations of the earth. All the tribes of red men assembled on the prairie to get out of the way of the waters. After they had gathered here from all parts, the waters continued to rise, until at length it covered all en masse, and their flesh was converted into red pipestone. While they were drowning, the young woman, a virgin, caught hold of the foot of a very large bird that was flying over, and was carried to the top of a high cliff not far off that was above the water. Here the eagle chipped off some stone and fashioned a pipe that he gave to her. She gave birth to twins, and their father was the war eagle, and her children have since peopled the earth. When the water had subsided, the Creator placed 2 women at the site to protect it and be guardian of it. The pipestone, which is the flesh of their ancestors, is smoked by them as the symbol of peace. Therefore, it has always been considered neutral ground, belonging to all tribes, where they are allowed to go and get the stone and smoke it together. Women obviously held a high place of importance in the plans and schemes of Great Mystery throughout all the native First Nations, and it is obvious that the pipe is a woman's medicine that she shares with her counterpart in balance and harmony. So in the search for Jigonsaseh, this has been my path. It eludes there being much more, but now lost to the effects of colonialism and history. And with that, she now has many names. The Great Peace Woman, the Mother of Nations, Jigonsaseh, the Beloved, the Peace Queen, but also the Maize Maiden, the Corn Mother, for the agriculture her people were noted for, and the struggle of changing a hunting culture that hunted humans to one of peace, with agriculture as the cornerstone. As the peacemaker had noted, her peoples had acres and acres of orchards and crops. But it was also noted by the soldiers of Clinton and Sullivan, which was sent to remove the Haudenosaunee from the rich farmland that George Washington needed to pay off the Revolutionary soldiers. The bushels and bushels of corn and food stores that they recorded as they destroyed them. The lynx, the wildcat, the panther, because of the literal translation of her name. And Star Heels, because she wore shells on her moccasins which glittered in the sunlight. It may have been also a reference to her medicine ability to walk the spirit trails. And the Fire Queen, as she may have well been the one to light the central hearth of the nation and the pipe of peace. Somehow, the stories of White Buffalo Calf women have survived, while the stories of the Haudenosaunee Mother of Nations have not. She was not an ordinary woman. She was the direct connection to heaven and earth, an alternate story to Adam and Eve, an alternate story to the patriarchal subjugation of the female gender. She was the first Jigonsaseh, the lynx of the creation epic, came back to help her people at a time when they needed reminded of the original instructions, arriving in the Peacemaker epic as a guiding light, having gained prominence before the Peacemaker met her with her unconditional love and Solomon-like wisdom. She has her own story, perhaps lost to the dust of time, but there are enough clues to support her ascendancy as Yegowane, honored woman of the Haudenosaunee.